Let me first thank Mark Minton and the rest of the Korea Society. I think the Korea Society has really done so much to shrink that Pacific Ocean and bring the United States and Korea together. And not only, as Mark was describing, not only the fact that we were together through some searing moments way back when, but I think it's a relationship that is very special, not only to way back when, not only to the history of it, but also to the future of this relationship. There's so much that is so special about this relationship. We have, Korea is not, it used to be a country where maybe you talk about North Korea if you're in a good enough mood to do that. But it was a country where the most you do is talk about Northeast Asia. But then Korea kind of went global. And, Korea is really, wherever you go in the world, you'll see Koreans, you'll see Korean products, you'll see really a country on the move. And of course, one place you can go to see a lot about Korea is right here in the United States, in New York, in the UN, where of course the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is Korean, and one of his main advisors is here tonight, Won-soo Kim. So Won-soo, great to see you, and I'm glad the boss let you go for a few minutes. You will not catch Ebola here, but you might elsewhere. So good to have you here. And let me say, a few words about Chris Klein. Whenever I hear Chris Klein described as Christopher Klein, I remember very well we were in North Korea together, and Christopher Klein was taking pictures of these women who had gotten off a farm vehicle. This is in downtown Pyongyang, and they had opened up a manhole cover or woman hole cover or whatever, and they were going down there with these big buckets bringing up, well, you know what, for I guess the collective farm. And Chris thought that was a real photo opportunity. And our aide, we never learned our aide's name. We just knew his last name was Kim. We called him Little Kim because he's a very little guy. And he said, Christopher Klein, it is forbidden taking those pictures. And Chris kept on taking those pictures. But anyway, so, Chris was originally a co-sponsor of this event, but lo and behold, the State Department legal brigade said, someone who's in the State Department cannot endorse a book or an author, but it didn't say the book or the author can endorse the person in the State Department. So I hereby endorse Christopher Klein, not only for his photographic capabilities, but what he, Chris and I went through some unbelievable places. We were, of course, in East Asia, all over the place. I first met Chris in Beijing, and I think it was during a time when the Red Sox looked in pretty good shape for the pennant. And so I was talking to the North Koreans, and I'd get these notes, and they were, scoring updates, 5-4 Twins in the 7th inning, this sort of thing. So I thought, I got to get that guy on my staff, not on this embassy Beijing staff. So thank you very much, Chris. And then for those baseball scores. And then I always remember we were in a lovely place really called Nuku'alofa, which is the capital of Tonga, to those of you who, don't play Trivial Pursuit. We got off the plane, and, there were, these came down the plane. There were all these women who were serving these wonderful dishes. The common denominator seemed to be sort of, mayonnaise, on top of what were some kind of, ham sandwiches. And the flies were on top of the mayonnaise. And the women were evident, and it was about 110 degrees there. And the women were evidently helping the flies stay cool because they never moved off of the mayonnaise, I remember. And I remember saying to Chris, we got to get voted off this island, and you're the one to get us off. So he got us off on I think it was called a Virgin PacificBlue.com. How could I forget? Because it was on the side of the airplane. You always worry about when there are websites on the side of the airplane. Anyway, Chris got us off there, and we went on to a lot of adventures, some of which are actually described in the book, Chris. My favorite was we go down to southern Iraq, and we're visiting some oil installation. There are all these Chinese. So the Chinese are sort of the people who've taken the most economic advantage from Iraq, and they're showing. And there were all these so-called containerized housing units, known as CHUs. If you're into the situation in Iraq, so you've got a lot of CHUs, and a lot to choose, I guess. But I remember I think it was British Petroleum. They're describing this where the Chinese are staying in these CHUs. Chris said, "Those are the Fu Manchus." I thought that was such a terrible pun, I would never forget it. And so, anyway, and so when I, after the Foreign Service, and a lot of people suggested, not the least of whom was Julie, my wife, who I still have the indents from the rolling pin she hit me with to tell me I really need to write a book. And I said, well, I don't know where to start, Julie. And Julie said, boom, you got to write that book. I mean, everyone's expecting. I said, well, who can help me get started? And Julie said, well, why don't you talk to Chris Klein? So I said, Christopher Klein? And he said, well, you need to start with an agent. And my dad, Joe, who's also sitting here tonight, has a really terrific agent named David Halpern. And so David Halpern, who's also here in the back row near the wine there. And so David and I began I think iterative process is the way you put it, where we're putting together a book proposal. And I'm in the Foreign Service, and I mean, I'm always a Foreign Service officer, but, my idea of writing a memo is 2 pages max. I mean, forget about page 3. Well, this was a 17-page book proposal, which I thought was at least 15 pages too long. But David put it out to some publishers, and then lo and behold, I mean, it was unbelievable the day this happened. Simon & Schuster and Alice Mayhew, who's here, outbid. Alice, I got to tell you, if you had offered no advance, you would have won anyway, because I mean the opportunity to work with Alice was just, I mean, unbelievable. So I thanked Chris for introducing me to David, and David for introducing me to Alice. And then I began writing a book. And, as I said, being in the State Department, you go past page 2 and you're into terra incognito. And I just didn't know, how I would go beyond there. I kept taking my contract with Simon & Schuster, talked about a minimum of 75,000 words, so I calculated that, and because I just thought I could never get close to something like that, I kept looking at the little word count at the bottom of the program, and I would write. People always have a different sort of battle rhythm of how to write a book, but I found that the only time I was able to kind of concentrate was 5 in the morning. So I wrote between 5 and 7. You wonder how I got up at 5. Well, there was Julie with a rolling pin going, time to get to work. And sometimes I just stare at the screen in the morning. And then other times things would come. And then I found myself kind of writing stories and not necessarily putting it together in a book. And so I just kept writing these stories. And that's when Alice comes in, and I had them kind of all jumbled up because I looked at some memoirs, actually George W. Bush's memoirs, where he doesn't use chronology. So you start with one from 2008, and then the next story is 2005, and you sort of wonder how that's working. And then Alice said, keep it to a chronology. Just that's how people live their lives. That's how you should write your book. So we went through chronology. And so that's why I start in the book when I'm like 2 years old or something, and just kind of schlep my way through. And then lo and behold, once I got to page 3 and page 4, I felt, oh my God, I can keep on doing this. I mean, you can kind of describe stuff that you never had time to describe in a State Department memo. And then you start thinking of things that happen. And then writing a book is like watching an old movie. It can be very transformative, where you're thinking, you're suddenly transformed into another era. And so Julie would hear me laughing at my desk, and she'd say, what's the matter? Such as the discipline we had of the house. What are you laughing for? You ought to be writing. And I'd say, well, I just remembered another story that I had forgotten about, and so just kept on schlepping through that book. I would see people and remember stories from those people. I mean, to see Bob and Adele Sweet here. Bob and Adele actually came out to Albania in 1991. Nobody went to Albania in 1991. Nobody even knew what Albania was in 1991. And there we had this senior judge from the Southern Manhattan District out there teaching the Albanians, procedures codes. Because in Albania, if you were accused of something, you didn't show up at court, no problem. That was the end of, they quashed the verdict. And then Adele was helping Irlandia Demokratika, the first kind of non-communist press, and helped them with their business model, et cetera. And then so I start remembering some of these stories in Albania, and keep going through. And then I start remembering, Holbrooke like he was still alive. And Richard Holbrooke, I mean, I cannot tell you the impression that he made on my life, on how I looked at the world. It's just almost too much. And that's why I have like 18 chapters on Holbrooke in the book, because every time I'd remember something else. Oh, I got to do that story. And before you know it, he's I'm not the dominant person in my memoir. Dick Holbrooke is the dominant person in my memoir, such as the sort of Holbrooke force field. And Kati, I really mean it. It's really, where are you, Kati? Somewhere. It's really very special to have gone through that. So the book has a lot on Bosnia, a lot on Kosovo, and people maybe now say, well, what was Bosnia and Kosovo? It's kind of, Boy Scout camp now. I mean, who cares about that? Actually, I'm very proud of those sections, because I think they really kind of lay the predicate for what our country can do in the world if we bring enough energy and positive, and sort of, optimistic outlook on those things. Go through a lot of this Balkan things, and then I come to North Korea. North Koreans, these are people only a mother can love. I mean, you just want to pick them up and hug them or do something else with them. And so I ended up, and the way I got to North Korea, and it's interesting, Mark, that you made these points about what I did while I was ambassador in South Korea, with too short a period, really. To me, the key relationship we have in the Korean Peninsula is, of course, with the Republic of Korea. It's not with that prison camp in the north. But the problem was the way we were managing that whole relationship with North Korea was hurting our relationship with South Korea. And so when Secretary Rice asked me to take that on, I took it on, because I thought that the best thing I could do for the Republic of Korea, for South Korea, was not be in South Korea as ambassador, but start negotiating the issues with North Korea. And the South Koreans, I think, really saw that the United States was serious. Up until that time, our policy on North Korea consisted of sitting in Washington making speeches about North Korea, and blood-curdling speeches about North Korea. And the South Koreans would say, look, we're the ones living right here. Who are you back in Washington to talk about North Korea that way? We're the ones living on the peninsula who have to deal with this problem every day. We're the ones who have the divided families. We're the ones who would suffer if there were ever military conflict. And so for you people back in Washington, named people like John Bolton, I didn't mean to mention John Bolton's name, but I just did. I'm sorry. You have no idea what it's like to be here on the peninsula and how we have to manage that issue on a day-by-day basis. And so I think I would say most of what I did with the North Koreans, I had in mind the U.S. relationship with South Korea. And then finally, I was, after all these adventures in the Balkans and in Albania and Macedonia and Bosnia, Kosovo, and I thought it was kind of, and then I go off to Korea to deal with issues. And I sort of, I thought that was kind of enough, and I was going to hang up my pinstripe suit and everything. By the way, one thing that should come across in this book is diplomats do not wear pinstripe suits. Usually wear sneakers or something, keep you moving. And so, so Hillary Clinton invites me up to her office, and I thought it was to talk about, she had an idea that with the new administration, maybe North Korea would be interested in engaging with the Obama administration in a way that they had lost interest with the previous administration. So I go up there and I expect, her to request another memo on North Korea, and instead she says, "Could you do one more thing?" And I was, "Sure, how long do you want the memo?" And she said, "I'd like you to go out to Baghdad, to Iraq." So I said, well, let me make 3 points about that. One, it's, I'm very honored. I know it's very important, but I'm going to need to think about this tonight. And I did. And then I thought, I don't want to say to my grandchildren that, yes, I was asked to go to Iraq, but I turned it down. So I said, no, I'm going to do it. I'll do it. So, and then I got friends of mine, people like Yuri Kim, who had worked with me in Seoul and then worked with me in East Asia Bureau, and came into my office and said, "I'll go with you to Baghdad." And of course, Chris Klein, who was working in Paris, which is not a bad assignment, but Chris was ready to try something different. And so off we went, and I think we had the adventure of our lives out there. So altogether, what is it a book about? It's a book about experiences, about stories, about kind of life and death situations. There's some funny moments. I mean, Bob Sweet came out to Iraq, and I wanted to make sure I had a really good security guy to take care of my good buddy from, going back to Albania in 1991. And so I put DJ, Yuri, remember DJ? I put him on I said, you go out there, you take good care of my buddy, Judge Sweet. And by the way, Adele would never forgive me if I screw that one up. So DJ goes out to the Baghdad airport, and there's Bob, schlepping his own bag, and DJ takes his bag and says, "Okay, now here's the flak jacket that you put on. Here's your helmet, and Judge, if there are any problems, I want you to stay real close to me." And whereupon Bob said, "Kid, if there are any problems, I want you to run like hell. I'll be fine." So, these were some of the moments, and they're all mentioned in the book. And $33, is it really? That's what it costs? Yeah, all right. I think it's a bargain, but I'm prejudiced. Once again, thank you so much, and sorry to talk so long. All right. Huh? Do what? Do a few questions, sure. Any Japanese media here? No questions?
Well,
Mark, do you have a question?
well, I have plenty of them, but I don't want to hold the whole room here. But this is being taped, so if you want to see it again or review it, it'll be on koreasociety.org shortly. Okay. And John Bolton, I think, has requested a copy.
I can send him. There's a whole chapter on Dick Cheney falling asleep in the Oval Office. Now, I admit it was a boring subject. It was about North Korea's nuclear weapons. And, that can't hold everyone's interest. I admit that. And then another moment where I have breakfast with President Bush, and Dick Cheney is more interested in the eggs than the conversation. But I don't want to be mean to him, and I hope he has a good time in Wyoming, which is a neighboring state to Colorado. So,
yeah. One question, President. The toughest, the hardest moment?
In the Foreign Service? Yeah. Well, it's always when people get killed. It's always when you lose colleagues. I had a very good friend, a guy named Bob Frazier, who I worked with in the Balkans. And one morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, I get a call from the ops center And it was our ambassador out in Bosnia named John Menzies who told me there had been a terrible accident and he couldn't tell me more. And I rushed into the ops center, and I just thought we had lost Bob Frazier, and he hadn't said anything about it. But I was just sure that we had lost Bob. You know, the way his voice was. And sure enough, he told me that Bob had been killed along with Nelson Drew and Joe Cruzel. And so I went with John Kornblum, who was our principal deputy assistant secretary with Holbrook in the field. And when Holbrook would go, he would either take me or Bob. And that time he took Bob because Bob was going to introduce him to Milosevic, so I stayed back. And so John and I went out to tell Katerina Frazier that her husband was killed. And I still, so that day, I mean, so we go out there, it's very, late, summer, very, humid, leafy day in Washington as you're going through these suburbs. And we go out to see Katerina Frazier, and her two daughters are there. And so, we've got these two teenage kids learning that their father was, no longer with us. And so that was kind of shocking in many respects. And then, of course, as we reconstituted the team, first we brought back the bodies, buried them, and then we had to reconstitute the team within a week. So I was back out on this Bosnian shuttle. And we all had this kind of sense of resolve, a sense that we've got to get this done. If not for the 200,000 victims of Bosnia, my Lord, I mean, there were thousands of people have been displaced, millions displaced, thousands killed. But for me, it was very personal. I mean, Bob had been killed, for what? For a place called Bosnia, which today, if you ask someone, people kind of, oh yeah, that was some problem 20 years ago. So that was for me the toughest moment. Yeah, Jay.
Did you ever see yourself running for political office?
Running for political office. Frankly, Jay, I don't know if I have the stomach for it because, I mean, I can't even take an unfavorable book review. And I think people who run for political office, I think people who run for political office have a kind of, they don't care what you say about them. So, I don't know. I mean, one thing that I hope comes very clear through this book is the degree to which I and many other of the people described here, all the Foreign Service officers, all the Foreign Service, people who go out there in these crazy places. By the way, I'm seeing Ben Metz in the back here. Ben was one of our lawyers in Baghdad who, was helping, go through the Iraqi constitution. But when I think of all these people who've gone out to these crazy places, we all love this country. I mean, we just, it's not the money. I can assure you of that. And so we all feel very strongly about this country. So would I say never to something like that? No, I would never say never. Yeah, I'd love to play second base for the Red Sox. So I think Pedroia is getting too old. Yeah, Joe.
Chris, this is more of a comment than a question. And while I miss you as a journalist, this is a wonderful sport. I miss you more as a citizen. I really wish that you were back out there doing stuff because I watched you do it, and there was none better.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. And, I think with any profession, you've got to, I try to define leadership. I know Colin Powell had a book like 12 Things of Leadership, and I think Rumsfeld had 13 lists of leadership or something. But to me, leadership is really about imparting a sense of optimism to the team and making people believe that you can do it. And we certainly kind of took that view. I took that view in everything, but certainly with North Korea. And maybe it was a little against the facts of the matter to be optimistic about North Korea. But on the other hand, every time we made success in the negotiations, our South Korean brothers, they got it. They got that we were really serious about doing our best. And so I think even though being optimistic about negotiating with North Korea is a bit of a reach, I think the whole team, and, you can ask Yuri and Chris, they would know better than I, but the whole team kind of felt that we were in it to win, And so that's the way I took everything in that. And part of being optimistic is having a little bit of a sense of humor. So people who didn't have a sense of humor didn't last long at all. Because you really, nothing's ever going to go right all the time. So you got to sort of be able to laugh about it and laugh at yourself. So I think it's kind of a band of brothers and sisters in this book. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you.